Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Lensic Performing Arts Center. I'm Joel Alberts, the Executive Director. It's a delight to have you here with us on this Tuesday night to talk about some incredible programs that we've all just enjoyed as a community. Obviously, the Lensic remains dark as we find our way through the COVID epidemic. We would certainly love to see you all here, and we're very thankful for all of the incredible support that we've had from Santa Fe through this process. If you haven't had an opportunity, the Lensic continues to engage a lot online. If you haven't had a chance, sign up for our This Week at the Lensic emails. If you look for emails from us, you will get some new content every week. We are welcoming local artists to the stage and sending out a new video of local performances every Friday. We're also having students who are back at school now, although virtually, but lots of talent, still looking for a stage that they can do their performances, and we're going to have a whole slew of new songs and dances and speeches and things like that that will be taking place from the student ranks as we move through the year. The Lensic remains very busy throughout this time. We're going to have a little delightful conversation tonight about the fabulous new online musical, A Killer Party. And as Arthur MacArthur said there, if no one is coming to the theater anymore, well then we have no choice but to bring the theater to their homes. And that is exactly what we're doing. In addition to the things that we talked about with our local performers, we have lots of great new virtual content that we're bringing out. The first new addition to that, Tony Award winner Jim Dale will be with us doing a virtual conversation, that will be on Sunday, September 13 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Jim has had an extensive 60-year career in theater, from the National Theater in Europe on through starring roles in a lot of Broadway shows. But most people will know him as the narrator of the Harry Potter book series. And we're going to have a terrific talk with Jim and his storied career. And we're also very excited that at the end of September, on the 26th, we're having a fundraiser concert for the Lensic with Grammy Award winner Keb Mo. Keb will do a performance for us. The evening begins at 7:30, and we're going to start the night looking at some of the different activities that the Lensic has going on still in the community, including our education programs, the work that we're doing with autistic students in the Santa Fe Public Schools, and also our relationship with a lot of groups that are doing some terrific things in the Native community just outside of Santa Fe, and looking at the culture and the different things that these Pueblo cultures have faced during the COVID epidemic. Tickets for that show are just $15, and you can buy those online at lensic.org at any time, and we'll look forward to seeing you there at the end of September. And in addition to all of those things, we're going to have several other shows in the next coming weeks that we'll be bringing to you online until we're able to bring everybody back into the theater. So do keep your eyes open for that. Obviously, support of the performing arts right now is more important than ever, and that's something that we can talk about with our guests here in a little bit too. Theaters and actors and musicians have been out of work now for several months, and we're finding our way back into bringing audiences back in. But the arts have been incredibly generous through this process, and there's been a lot of great material with living room concerts and all sorts of other things that have taken place. And the only way to make that happen is to support the arts in your community. If you've not already made a donation to help support our nonprofit community-supported theater through this process, please go to lensic.org. There will be some links available through the chat feature in your YouTube live broadcast, and I hope that you'll support us until we can get the theater back into its normal operations. Lastly, speaking of that chat, it's a great opportunity to submit questions. We're going to be talking to Nathan Tysen and Kait Kerrigan about A Killer Party, and if you have some questions about what you experienced with this show over the last 3 weeks, please submit that into the YouTube chat, and we will drop your questions into tonight's experience as well. But it is my delight now to introduce our special guests, Nathan Tysen and Kait Kerrigan. Kait wrote the book for A Killer Party. She has had an extensive career in theater. She wrote the plays Transit and Imaginary Love, which was a 2006 Princess Grace Award finalist. With her primary collaborator, Brian Loudermilk, she also wrote the musical adaptation of the beloved children's book series Henry and Mudge. Their musicals, The Woman Upstairs and The Wrong Number, were both featured in the New York Musical Theater Festival. And their latest musical, an unauthorized autobiography of Samantha Brown, was recently developed at a workshop at the Manhattan Theater Club, directed by Christopher Ashley. The Kerrigan Loudermilk team are recipients of a 2006 Jonathan Larson Award and a 2004-5 Jonathan Larson Fellowship at the Dramatists Guild. So I'd like to welcome Kait and her husband, Nathan Tysen. Nathan is the lyricist of A Killer Party. His Broadway and West End credits include Tuck Everlasting, with music by Chris Miller, and the Olivier-nominated Amelie, music and co-lyrics by Daniel Messe. Other works with Chris Miller include Nathan's lyrics for the Burt Part Boys and Fugitive Songs. In 2014, he won both the Edward Kleben Prize for Most Promising Lyricist and the Fred Ebb Award for Excellence in Musical Theater Songwriting. Nathan is also my cousin, and this is a real delight. I've been following Nathan and Kait's careers for a long time. Actually, I had the delight to present one of Kait's shows before I've been able to do anything with you, Nathan. So this is very exciting to have you both here. So welcome to Santa Fe.
Hello.
Hi.
It's good to have you here. So A Killer Party is fantastic. It's just
Thank you.
it feels like such a gift, in this time. So how did this idea for a Broadway murder mystery take shape?
It all came from the crazy mind of composer / producer Jason Howland. Jason is best known for his work as the musical director and arranger of the Carole King musical Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
He also was the composer of Little Women on Broadway. I'm working with him on a separate project. We've been put together. We've been working for the last 2 years, and it's just been a wonderful collaboration. I think he's an absolute genius. And about 4 weeks into the pandemic, he just said, there must be a way that not only we can Broadway artists can not only create something and kind of fuel our creative and juices, but also possibly make a living too, or at least get paid for what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And he thought, let's try to write a musical that we can put online. And he had a very simple premise. And that premise was, if we do a murder mystery, and someone dies in the first episode, and we have a detective that comes in, the first thing the detective can do is to immediately sequester all of the suspects. So each suspect is in a different room, meaning each of these episodes that we would write can feature a fantastic Broadway actor, but they can film it in their own homes. Mm-hmm. So it's a lovely nod to the quarantine without it actually being about the quarantine. So he pitched just that much to us on April 16th. I still have the text that was just like, I've got this crazy idea and maybe Kait wants to get involved too. And now here we are 4 months later, and we've written an 80-minute full length.
It's longer than that.
80. Yeah, actually, you're right.
90
it's
minutes.
90 minutes, full length musical broken up into 9 episodes with 20 songs. That is now available to the world. Now the licensing is available as well, which you can talk about, and there's a cast album. So
it's, normally it takes a minimum on the fastest track for a Broadway show. It takes a minimum of 2 years, and generally more like 5 years to do a show.
Tuck Everlasting was my first Broadway show, and it took 10. So.
Yeah, and most projects that I've been involved take closer to 10, and it's been really wild to be able to do something this quickly, and that is completely Jason and his ability to gather people and create momentum and not sleep. I don't know. He doesn't seem to sleep. But we started with a couple different ideas. We pitched him a couple different ideas for how we might make this story work. And then we landed on this idea of, we really wanted to do something that felt like a nod to theater all over the place. We knew what our audience was. We knew our audience was people who were missing theater. So we wanted to play with that idea. And the idea of a sort of vainglorious artistic director felt right. So we started from there. And then, there's so many wonderful kinds of characters that hang out in theaters, in that kind of theater, and the kind of theater where the roles become a little entrenched and things, they have the way that things happen. So it was really exciting to kind of play with those tropes as we built it out. And we also brought in our friend Rachel Axler, who is a TV writer and a brilliant comedian, because we realized that we had to write something really silly. And she is one of the silliest, most remarkable writers I know. And so I was like, if I'm going to be a part of writing a murder mystery, it better be really funny. And I am not that funny. So I need help. I was like, I could do structure, but we need this to be the most over the top, ridiculous thing that we can make it. So it was kind of a dream team, and it was really, really fun.
It also was the first thing that we have written together.
That was a question I had for you.
Yeah.
And before we get too far, Nathan, is she that funny?
Is Rachel that funny? Is Kait that funny?
Is Kait that funny? Because I feel like she's
medium funny, but Rachel's
funny, but Rachel's super funny.
Rachel's super funny. We would sit there and I would write a lot of times. What we did was, we'd know what the song was going to be. We would talk a lot about what the scene and what the song was going to be for an episode, and what those cornerstones of the episode were going to be.
Yeah. And
sometimes we would write scene, and then Nathan would write songs, or a lot of times he would start writing the song and then I'd work the scene around it. And I love structure. And actually, I didn't know that I would enjoy writing a murder mystery. It was never something that occurred to me to write. But the fact that it is all structure and it's all this puzzle that you're putting together, I found very satisfying. So we would put these pieces of the puzzle together, and then I would bring Rachel in, and we talked through all of the bigger ideas all together. But then a lot of times I would sort of structure it out, and then I would put in the places where the jokes were supposed to go. And some of my jokes stayed, but then a lot of times we would sit there watching in the Google document as she punched it up and made it extraordinary. And it was such a masterclass. It was that was one of the things that I loved about what we did, was that we learned so many new skills. We had never done anything in film before. Yeah. And so we learned so much about how to tell a story in film. And I learned so much about comedy, and both of it, and you did too. We both
absolutely
spent so much time thinking about what's funny.
I feel like in most of the shows that I've written, there's an opportunity for maybe 1 or 2 comedy songs. Yeah. And then there's a lot of pressure because those songs better be funny. And as nervous as I was to write something where every song better be funny, I found that there was something freeing about that too, because then you just knew that was your directive and you had to follow it, and you just kind of had to find
the funny
all the time. Yeah. Which in these times was like a lovely challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing was true in the story, that over and over again, you had to make the choice that created the most ridiculous solution. And that's definitely not the way I'm used to working. I like to make people cry. And so it was the inverse goal, but it was really, really fun to do. And it felt like therapy in some ways. Yeah.
It sounds like that was almost a perfect situation for you, particularly in the epidemic time. That this is just what you needed, was an opportunity to put the ability to make people cry aside and just focus on being funny and light and quick.
And I think it's what all of the actors needed too, because they were all primarily either in isolation completely. Our detective was completely in isolation the entire time, totally by herself. I actually don't know how she did what she did.
Which means that she filmed absolutely everything by herself on her iPhone.
It was insane. But a lot of people were just with their partner, and their partner was filming them. But I think that it being this really over the top, ridiculous, silly thing that we were asking them to do, I think it was exactly what everyone needed. We just needed to like let loose with our
Felt like summer camp.
theater.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it did feel
it
a
was
little like summer
very,
camp.
hey kids, let's put on a show in the best way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Got a crazy idea. It just might work.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. So it seemed to me like watching it, it felt like it was a big group of friends. Like these are all people who know each other, and you know that this came from personal relationships. Is that the case? Is this, I know a guy and you know we're looking for that?
Yeah, to an extent. It was definitely a network of friends.
Yeah.
And Jason was definitely at the center of it. Jason had already talked to a couple actors like immediately as soon as we started talking about what the plot might be. There were already a couple actors who had said that they would
Right.
get involved.
Laura Osnes was one of the first actors to sign on. And then she also helped make some phone calls and connect to people. But I think the big thing that Jason, like, he knew it was going to be a big ask, and he just
More than we
didn't
did.
want anyone that was going to be difficult. You know, it was like, find your nice friends that are going to be willing to do something like this, and not make it excruciating.
Yeah,
And
it
that's
was
what happened. But it's funny, you know, we had a little rap party maybe 4 or 5 days ago, and we did a Zoom and we just invited everyone from the editors to the actors to the musicians, and about 40 people were able to join the Zoom. And I realized that of those 40 people, I had only met in person 8 of them.
Yeah.
Most of the actors
Including
I
our daughter.
not even worked with. Yeah, and that was including Kait and our daughter. Yeah.
that helps the odds.
Yeah, so you know, I look forward to the day that we can all like get in a bar together and celebrate, or you know,
Yeah, we all feel very
sing these
connected.
songs live. That how exciting would that be?
Wow. So all of the recording, everything was done, you know, in people's apartments. That's
Basically
Yeah.
in their closets.
Yeah,
Right.
They
under
were-
blankets.
They were
was
told,
there
go into a
was
closet, put a
dropped
blanket
off?
over their head, and record into your iPhone.
Yeah. So there's a costumer. There's, you know, obviously a need for some equipment. You know, everybody probably has an iPhone or some sort of thing that they can do some of the work with. But what did the production team do in order to make this workable?
They sent a lot of packages via Amazon. There was, and that was actually one of the biggest delays in the process. Because at first Jason had a very ambitious idea of having this released in June. And one of the biggest problems that we hit was not actually our ability to write it or their ability to film it, but our ability to get props to people quickly enough.
Right.
So then we started moving the timeline a little bit, and then we realized how long this was all going to go on and how slowly we were going to be moving before we are able to sort of come back together. And we realized that we could take a little bit more time and be a little bit more ambitious with what we were trying to do. And that's how we ended up with the August deadline.
But costumes were sent to people. Some specific props were sent to people.
Duplicates of props were sent to people, so people would have them at different
They
locations.
could all hold up the invitation at the same time.
And they all had those scripts.
Yeah, and
I was so blown away by the prop, the fact that there were props that were going all over the place, the kind of continuity that people were building.
The painting was painted by the costume designer, and then was scanned and sent to a local, I guess it was in LA, a local frame shop that then framed it and brought it to the actor's house, because we knew that was an important clue. Spoiler alert, but important clue.
And we figured, you know, we kept trying to make sure that like every actor had something that was like a visual cue for them, and to also not make there be a lot of them. Like we tried to keep things really lean on that front.
Right. And really we did a lot of that because Jason was asking everyone to do this for free, you know, at the outset, hoping that as we sell subscriptions, then everyone shares in the money that we make. Everyone takes a small percentage. So it was trying to, you know, and of course, we're relying on these fantastic actors and their big fan bases to sell tickets. You know what I mean? So we wanted to make it kind of as easy as possible for them. One of the things the actors kept saying when we all were Zooming was, Jason was like, this will take 2 days, guys. I promise you, it's only going to take you 2 days to film all this material. And then, 4 months later, we finally have this piece. And Jason told us when he first said, let's write this musical, he's like, and we can write it in 10 days, right? Just 10 days full length musical.
But he also wanted it to be, when we started it, he was talking about it being these like really short songs and 5-minute episodes. And I was like, how are we going to do 5-minute episodes? Like 2 songs in a 5-minute episode?
Yeah.
And so it all like ballooned out and became, luckily for us, I think it became a full-length musical.
Mm-hmm.
More satisfying, I think.
Was the cat from a songwriting standpoint, because the songs are so they're so definable to so many of the actors and their talents. Were actors in place before you started doing the writing? Did you have an idea of who you were writing for, or were you just writing to character at that time?
I think the only song that we didn't, because we just started at the beginning, and the first song we wrote, well, this was before we knew that we were going to have, sorry, let me start again. The first song that we wrote was A Killer Party. Mm-hmm. Which is Varther setting. It's the opening number basically. But then once we started writing, we realized we wanted to have a prologue in order to establish it, because A Killer Party, and it's a bop, man. Like I just think Jason's work on that song is so good. But it's a lot of information. It's like information overload. And we learned that throughout the whole process, especially in a murder mystery, when you want the songs to do the heavy lifting, like there's a lot of information you have to get out in a lyric, and you have to find ways to make it manageable and understandable. So we wrote that song, and at that point Michael James Scott had not come on yet. And luckily he came on and he was perfect, and he sang it really, really well, and his energy is fantastic. But from then on, everybody had been cast, so we knew who we were writing for.
Mm-hmm. Was it I found that every episode that went through it, the previous one, I'm always like, oh, I love this actor the most. And then the next one would come and it would be, okay, I love this actor most now.
Yeah.
Was that kind of an experience you had too? I felt like I was pulling for different people all the time. And from the creative side as well, was that something that that you allowed yourself to get to know the person a little bit more as you were doing this, that you just sort of, absorbed in your quick process of getting this done?
I think even when we didn't know someone personally, there were only a couple actors that we didn't know personally when we started, but we knew what their wheelhouse was from the beginning. And it was really exciting to watch everybody. Like, that Laura Osnes she's like a Disney princess personified. Like, she's the most beautiful, most charming, most lovely person in the world. And we were so excited to make her not that.
Right.
And
but we also knew that she is really, really funny.
That she's a really great
and doesn't
actress,
get that opportunity.
And she never gets to like dig in. And so it was really exciting to be able to like play out some of these people's abilities. Like I've seen Laura Osnes in an audition room doing like really interesting, darker comedy, and you're like, you're incredible, you can do anything. So knowing that you want to kind of use those kinds of skills. I think one of the people who like really surprised me was Jackie, actually. Like, she went so far with the ASMR stuff.
Jackie Burns, who plays the wife.
And we didn't know that episode we had talked about the possibility of that episode being sort of its own like bottleneck episode, like by itself. And then we ended up putting it with some other things. And then when we saw what she and her partner had done, and like the cinematography and the crazy outlandish things that they did and how far they went with it, and how much fun it was to be in this weird alternate universe that you didn't know existed until the episode before. We realized what a gem that was and how exciting it was to let that just be its own world. And that was definitely one that felt like that, like it was like this discovery. And we always knew that like Alex Newell is such a star and such an incredible performer and so funny and like has that unreal voice. And so we were like, from the beginning, we were like, okay, if we have Alex, we want to have these 2 moments, and we want to have this thing that pays off late in the game that seems like silly in the beginning,
Mhm.
but like structurally that we get to it back, we come back to it, and it ends up actually really pushing the story forward in a way that you couldn't have expected it to.
Yeah.
Mhm. That's great. So how did so there's an editing process. This is being filmed. How does that change? I mean, you're theater writers, so it's a very different thing to have that extra bit of technology to help you. How did that impact the way that you created?
Well, first, a shout out to the editors. Um, there were two ladies that did all of the editing, and they also did all of the special effects and all of the animation. They on the Zoom call, we heard that they had put in 900 hours
Oh my God.
working on this thing, and I don't know if that's each or
Yeah,
separate,
it's a
but
lot.
they did a lot because the marching orders for the actors was basically, I mean, Mark Bruni was the director of the piece, and he was very smart as far as giving them assignments of like where they need to look so that it looks like they're really talking to someone in the same room and stuff like that. But then they all filmed every one of their scenes, every one of their shots 4 times, just so we had a whole bunch of material to pick
Like
from.
4 different angles.
From 4 different
basically,
angles,
like
right.
a far away one, and then one that's close up.
But then it was really up to the editors to sort through just hours and hours of I mean, I heard that first the footage that was shot for the opening number was a terabyte's worth of information. Like they actually had to ship a full because it was going to take like a week to upload it
Right.
through the internet. They shipped a hard drive
Yeah.
to HMS
so-
Media. They're in Chicago. They're the ones that did the editing.
And so no one had really seen much of the footage.
Yeah.
Because the hard drive was in Chicago. And so she was completely, she had to sort of go through it and figure it out and
Yeah.
figure out what to do with all of that. And it was also that they were really, really large files. So it wasn't just that many takes. But what ended up happening that was really interesting for us was that, you know, normally there's a table read and there's a workshop and there's all these moments where as a group, you're putting something together, you're asking questions, you're getting questions from actors. None of that happened. We did a table read of the first 2 episodes with half the cast at the very beginning, and then we never read through it again. And we didn't read the rest of it. So the actors also didn't know what happened at the end of the story for a very long
we
time.
ended that table read. It was a Zoom meeting, and we just said, all right, one of you's the killer. You'll find out soon. Have a great.
But what ended up happening
recording
was that
session.
our incredible editors would do a first pass, and then we would make cuts. And we would rearrange things, and we would decide that episode 5 should be this its own little thing, and not have part of episode 4 inside of it. And they would gamely go back and probably curse us under their breath, but they would go back and they would make that happen for us. So basically our rewrite process became our editing process, which I think is, I think that actually is something that happens when you're writing for TV or film, that like the editing process is such an enormous part of making a movie. But it was not supposed to be an enormous part of the process,
Right.
With what we were doing.
I mean, as a songwriter, like I really look forward to that moment where you've written it. It's in a place where you can give it to an actor and they can finally sing it, and then you realize how mean you were to them as far as it's difficult to sing, the vowel sound is wrong, clarity is all over the place, and then you get that rewrite step. I never got that rewrite step. So there's a couple little places as I listen to the cast album where like I glitch a little bit and wish that I could tweak it, and yet there's also something freeing in it too. You know what I mean? Like we wrote it, it's out there, we just kept going, and I think if we would have stopped and done all of those rewrite steps, we would not be talking to you right now.
Yeah, and I mean that 10-year process is you get a lot done in those 10 years, and you make a lot of changes, and it's sometimes a bit better, but sometimes it's not that
Sometimes
much
you find
better.
you're rewriting just
because people want you to rewrite because they're worried because of people's anxieties. And what was so amazing about this is that I think we got the big things right.
Yeah.
And then there's, yes, I can nitpick, and yes, I could definitely fix some things, but now it exists and people can enjoy it. And it's not perfect, but it wouldn't have been perfect if we spent 10 years on it either.
Totally. But it's you're seeing something that's at least very pure. You know, it is like the 100% kind of like first idea, go.
And I think for right now, I think that's that feels more important to me at this juncture.
Well, and in some ways it feels like like a sign of this time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that all of the perfect things, you're used to Zoom meetings when the dog starts barking at the mailman. You're used to things that just aren't perfect anymore.
Yes.
Yep.
And I think that because our lives have shifted so much that there's something that's joyous in the irregularities.
I think it's really astute. And I think that that's what was out. Some of the places where I found the most joy in this were places where either it looked like the impossible happened. Like there's this moment between the detective, between Justine and this character, Cameron Mitchell-John, where they rehearsed the scene a lot together. And it really felt like they were in the same room when they definitely weren't. And it felt like magic. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there are these moments where like everyone's standing inside a door frame because we put a door frame on top of the door frame so that you knew that they were entering this room. And otherwise you didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And both of those things made me really happy and made me laugh.
Right.
And I think I think you're right. I think that that's one of the things that feels so connected to this moment.
Yeah. So as a pair of married lyricists, was there assistance? Did you guys work together on some of the lyric writing as well? Was there, crawl into bed saying, I can't get this one right?
I remember one very specific lyric. When I knew it's in the opening number, it's in the song A Killer Party. And I knew I wanted to do a play on words with Oliver Twist. And I knew I wanted to do something about, playing with the idea of there's a twist in the murder mystery, there's a twist in the show, but there's also a musical called Oliver. And I had a very specific amount of syllables because it's near the end of the song. So basically the puzzle had been built, and and so I had to basically solve the puzzle. And I basically just said to Kait, I know there's something in here. And then for about 10 minutes, we went back and forth and just kind of like,
line by
line figured out
the grammar
of it. And the line is, turns out that Oliver ain't the best twist. And it still comes very, very quickly, but I'm very proud of it. And I'm glad that, and we worked on it together.
But there is so much of this, I think in an ideal situation when you're writing a musical, like I eventually write the dialogue, but if I'm writing the book, or I eventually write the lyric if I'm writing the lyric. But what I love is the part before that, where the book writer and the lyricist are talking about how this works and how the song's telling the story and how the dialogue's going to tell the story and how those two things are going to intermesh. And what we spent a ton of time doing was working through making sure the actual story of it all was one story, and that it wasn't, okay, go write that song, or okay, go write the plot. But that was part of what we all did together. And Jason was a huge part of that, and Rachel was a huge part of that. But it was really nice to have all hands on deck, making sure that we all agreed that the story was the right story, especially for something that's a murder mystery. So it has to hold enough water. It has to, it's silly as can be, but at the same time, like the actual arc of the plot ends up being really important to it being satisfying as a murder mystery. And so making sure that we were like always kicking the tires on that and always making sure that everyone agreed that this was the best kind of twist, this was the best way to turn it, was really important.
Yeah, that's very exciting. So now that first of all, at the end of the musical, it says that there may be something else that's coming. You going to do this again?
We're talking about it.
The exciting thing is everyone is game.
Yeah.
All the actors. I think the editors, we might need to send them
I think we've already sent them something, but I think we might
have to send them more things.
Right. More things will be required.
This.
But they did come to the Zoom, so I think they don't completely hate us.
Right. No, it was a total joy, and we have an idea, and the dream is that next time around we might not have to do it all by ourselves. That maybe there'll be a little bit of support, looking for somebody to kind of help push along, the next two. I mean, number 2, number 3, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, but we have a sense of what we know what the next season would be. Approximately. We don't know who done it, but we know who would die. We know certain things like
who
that.
died.
Setting.
Yeah.
We know a decent amount. And it would be really fun. And then we have an okay sense of what season 3 would be, which is part of the next conversations that we're in is also about who that, maybe they're being a production company, or maybe they're being some kind of streaming platform that you're trying to connect with, so that where you're releasing that from the beginning.
Yeah. So the next question then is, what are the things that you learned from this process that when you can get back to writing for a stage, what have you learned from this that you think you will carry into what had been your day job, or what's the lesson learned from this?
Wow.
I think it's that we spend too much time to make something. I think that's something I already thought, but this convinced me that we could go faster and that it would be okay. And that there's something, I mean, in the 1960s and 70s, we made musicals much faster than we make them now. And we took a lot more risks when we made them. And I think that that's something that we should be getting back to. I think that we should not take 10 years to make a musical. I think that makes it a really weird financial agreement between everybody. And I think that what's so cool about this is that we made something in 4 months, which is extraordinarily short, and shorter than probably what it should be. It's all because we were in lockdown and nobody could do anything anyway. So it's okay if it takes longer than that. But I think there's room for improvement on how we produce musicals. And I think that they can be done with more efficiency and trust, I think, in the artists who are making it. That's something that I feel like one of the things, because Jason was the executive producer of it, and that's something that happens on TV shows too, where your executive producer is one of the writers, and there's a kind of trust that comes from that, as opposed to people who are producers, people who are writers. The writers don't have a lot of control about how quickly things move. So that was something that I thought was really interesting in the process. So I think I'll be a little bit more dogged.
Well, you were saying that, and I was thinking about Varther's experience as Gavroche and how many years it took Les Mis to become what it did.
Yeah.
This is probably apt that is.
Yeah.
So are there other people in the New York theater community that are also thinking about doing some things like this too?
Not that we know of.
It must be happening.
Yeah.
It's gotta be happening. Exactly.
But there's definitely a couple smaller things that we've seen, and a couple different murder mystery things came up around the same time that we announced.
They weren't musicals.
But they weren't musicals.
They're more like dinner party murder mysteries. No, we kept wondering if we were going to be the first, and we are.
Yeah.
Which is exciting.
Yeah. I know that both Jason and Mark Bruni, the director, have been getting a lot of questions about how it was made. And a lot of people want to know how we did it.
Yeah.
And just to try to replicate it. And it is replicable, but it takes a lot of commitment from 50 different people at least, which is really connected to someone, having somebody like Jason, just someone who has that kind of energy and that kind of ability to corral people into one vision.
Keep a lot of plates spinning.
So many. We had so many nights where, we had some long nights towards the end, especially when the editings that we would see an edit, and we'd be sending back notes. And every time we would turn to each other, and we were like, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm not the executive producer.
Yes.
So glad I'm not Jason. Whew.
Were you doing a lot of song rewrites at the end, or how did the process spin out in the long run?
There weren't really
kind of verse here and there.
Yeah, it was cutting more than anything. Yeah, we didn't really get to rewrite anything.
We couldn't change any footage. So
we did ask Carolee Carmelo, who plays the Grand Dame detective. We asked her to do a lot of additional. We kind of thought we'd see her at the beginning and at the end, but in moments where we realized we need to kind of remind the audience what is happening, we're like, Carolee, do you mind going into your closet one more time and recording a voiceover for us that kind of helps us set up the next scene?
Yeah.
So she was our cheat when we needed to get out information.
And we did that a couple times with a few other people where we were like, let's change this one line, but we'll look at this other person.
Right.
But we didn't do it very often. More often than not, it was about like rearranging something that already existed. It was like collage work,
right?
Because that's what we could do at that point. Because once the actors had finished filming, they were pretty much done.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So to turn the question a little bit here, what's your thought about the Broadway theaters reopening at some point? What are you hearing, and what are you anticipating, or is it still just a great long winding road ahead?
Looks pretty windy.
Yeah, I mean, what we've heard is March, and the first shows to open are the behemoths,
and the ones that could still get more local tourists, like not people with driving distance.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then they're gonna see how that goes, and then open it up.
I don't think there's a lot of talk of like social distanced opening, like trying to do half capacity or anything like that. But it's really hard to know what it's going to be. And I mean that we that's the rumor we heard, and there could be a million changes between now and then.
Right. We can talk at Christmas and it will be an entirely different story as it was going into this.
Terrifying. And it's very sad. And my mother, who is probably watching, shout out Linda Tysen.
Hello, Linda.
And of course my father, Harry Tysen. We realized that we hadn't been in New York. We live in New Jersey, and we're about a 30-minute drive from the city. And we decided, let's go just into the city. We've been there since March and just drive around a little bit. And proud to say that everywhere we drove, people were wearing masks. But driving through Midtown was really, really sad. I mean, stores are open, restaurants are doing what they can. They've all kind of built out onto the streets.
And some of it's really beautiful. There's like, I don't know if probably some of the patrons at your theater have gone to like Restaurant Row on 46th Street, and they shut the entire street down, and it's all outdoor.
They've all built like little patios.
Really cool.
It's beautiful. It's like what Restaurant Row should be.
Yeah, it is.
But as far as the theaters are concerned, they're all just
it's weird,
dark and
and there's other areas of the city that feel a little bit more opened up. We drove downtown and it was a lot busier, but Broadway Theater was the lifeblood of Midtown, and without it, it was all about its tourism there, and without having those two things in play, it's a little bit of a ghost town.
Yeah. And one other quick turn of questioning here. I am, and the Lensic is deeply involved in arts education. We engage 18,000 kids a year in arts education programs. And I got to know Kait from your work with Henry and Mudge that was with Theater Works, which is one of the best theater companies out there. And Nathan, your work, you've done a lot of singing for children, and you've written songs for Sesame Street and done those things as well. Can you guys talk a little bit about your arts education experience and how teachers and your path got you to where you are?
I grew up in a small town in Kansas, Salina, Kansas, right in the middle of the state. I just think I was very, very lucky for some reason in this little community. There was a real love and respect for the arts. And I had an unbelievable high school drama teacher named Kait, who is still one of my best friends. I brought her to opening night to Tuck Everlasting on Broadway. She's given so much to so many students, and yet whenever you ask her about it, she's like, listen, I just have a key to the door and I unlock it and let you guys do the thing, and then I lock it when you're done, which is such a lie, but I just love that. It's never been about her. It's always just been about giving opportunities to her students. So a big shout out to her. And then the other thing that happened to me when I was 15 years old is I went to a summer camp that actually started in all places in Salina, Kansas. It is now based in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, but it is called Lovewell Institute for the Creative Arts. And Lovewell is a program where they take 30 kids from all over the US, and in 3 weeks, you write a full-length musical. I went to the camp thinking I was going to a musical theater camp and thinking I was going to be the lead in their show. And then very quickly realized, oh, if you want to be the lead in the show, you have to write all the songs first. And so at 15, this was the first time I ever wrote anything. And by the time we were 2 weeks into the process, I kind of looked around and realized, oh, I hadn't written myself a role. I'd just been writing songs for the show. And I realized it didn't matter. Like, for me, the most rewarding thing was writing these songs, and I would have never known if I'd been given an opportunity. And Lovewell does that not only for writers, but they do it for designers. Like, basically, before you ever get to perform, you have to learn all of the other aspects of the program. And it's pretty miraculous. Like, Lovewell taught me how to collaborate, like not being afraid of trying to create something with a whole bunch of people in a room. And actually, once I met Chris Miller, who is my primary collaborator at grad school, I made him come down and staff a Lovewell with me so he could see where I came from as an artist. And then once I met Kait Kerrigan, I made her come down to Lovewell and staff a Lovewell with me. So
yeah, it's a lie. We actually did write one other show together, but we also wrote it with 30 teenagers.
Yeah, 30 other teenagers.
You can't count that one.
But that program is still around. Kids can still experience it. It now happens all over the world. And I have a lovely relationship with them where if I have free time, we continue to write shows with kids. What about you, Kait Kerrigan?
I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania that was actually very similar to Salina in many ways. Yeah. There was a couple. My mom and my dad were both actors when I was little, and so I was around theater. I also played the violin from the time I was 3. So I was doing, I played from 3 to 18. So that was a big, huge part of my life. But when I was a teenager, I started wanting to act. And I went to, my dad works at a program called YPTW, which is this young people's theater workshop outside of Philadelphia in the Swarthmore area. And I went there to a summer camp, and I did that. And then I also did Upper Darby Summer Stage, which is this very big musical theater program in Upper Darby. And that was sort of the beginning of me finding my people. And some of those people, including Brian Loudermilk, are still my closest friends and collaborators. Brian and I met at YPTW camp when we were kids, and we reconnected when we were in college, and we were both in New York City, and we started writing together. But that was the beginning of it for me, and definitely that experience of summer theater and like being able to get away from school, which I did school theater too, but those concentrated periods where everybody was making something was the beginning of me falling in love with the process. And then it was in college that I started writing and directing. And that's when I realized that that's what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, good stories. So now as parents, what are the things that you're doing for your little girl so that she's super engaged?
Well, she knows everything about all musicals.
And every Barbie doll and little plastic doll that she has with red hair is named Bernadette Peters.
She's obsessed with Bernadette Peters right now. like really obsessed. It's weird. And she really believes, because she's 4. So she really believes that everyone should know who Bernadette Peters is, and is really confused when people don't. But yeah, she's a complete musical theater nerd. And she's a total killer party nerd, like really into it. It was a pandemic. She was just with us the whole time.
There was no way that she was not going to be part of this process.
And the negative side is that she definitely does know what a murder mystery is, and she knows that there is a dead body. The positive side of it is that she understands that it's fiction, and she understands that it's supposed to be fun, and that it's about the whodunit and about the solving. And she has gotten she was completely obsessed over the 3 weeks that we were releasing episodes, because she didn't know what the end game of it was going to be.
Yeah.
So she and Nathan's parents were watching it with us, and watching 3 of them watch it was really, it was kind of dazzling to watch this little 4-year-old like putting together clues and making some really good deductions.
Yeah.
They never got it though. They never figured it out.
No.
They didn't figure it out.
No.
Very good. Well, I'm going to let you guys get on your way. You are on your own on a little vacation, which is fantastic, and you have to enjoy that. So I want to thank you so much for your time, and I want to thank everyone who's joined us this evening as well. And this will remain on YouTube so that we can come back to it over the months to come. Today, of course, is August 25, so there are only 4 shopping months left till Christmas, and a Killer Party cast album might be just the thing.
Yes.
So it
They
is
have merch.
downloadable. What's that?
They have merch. They have hats. and
Oh my gosh, you've got
t-shirts.
everything.
It's legit.
We were really surprised. We didn't know those were coming.
Very good. Well, it is a great deal of fun, and I'm so happy that it's still out there for people to get their opportunity to watch that. And go to Vimeo, and you can order your subscription to watch all 9 episodes, and it is terrific. And it is, of course, a nail-biting finale, and it's but it's just a lot of fun, and it's so wonderful to see musical theater that's creative and fun right now. We're just having a great time with it. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us, and to the Lensic audience, we hope
Thank you,
that
Lensic.
again soon. And please support us until we can get back. Support the arts. It's very important. It's going to be a big part of our lives when we all get to be together again. So thank you very much, and have a good night.
Good night.